Guys, so today is September 1st and September is Suicide Prevention Month. So for this month, most of my videos are going to be talking about suicide, talking about prevention strategies, talking about my own experience with it, and as well as anything that you guys want to know about it. I will be making videos about that stuff. So today's video, I'm going to share a little bit of my own personal story and how suicide has affected my life. So quick, kind of obvious trigger warning for this video. I'm going to be talking about suicide. I will not go into any detail. I won't name any specific methods, but that is the sole focus of this video. So if that is something that is triggering to you, please don't watch this video. But if you're interested to learn a little bit more about me and kind of what I've gone through and the things that have helped me, then stick around and check out this video. Thanks. So I know that I've talked about suicide a lot on this page. It's one of the biggest things that affects my mental health. So it's something that I've spoken about here before. I've done some informative videos as well as some personal videos. This video, I'm going to try to just kind of condense a little bit of my story and talk about how suicide has directly affected my life. So to start off, the first time that I ever experienced suicidal thoughts was when I was 11 years old. So initially, these thoughts were very intrusive. They were kind of scary. I didn't really know what to make of them or why I was having them at the time. The way they first kind of came up for me was, I remember pretty clearly I was doing homework, and for some reason, as I was like doing my homework, I was like, if I don't finish this assignment by whatever time, then I should kill myself. And this was like pretty alarming for 11-year-old me. I hadn't really thought in depth about suicide before, and so it was really scary that it just kind of popped into my mind like that when I wasn't really expecting it. And after that, growing like as I was a child and suicide, the thoughts still came and they still kind of bothered me. They kind of progressed a little bit to they were like kind of random at first, where they would pop into my head at random times. And it eventually progressed to where my kind of internal monologue about suicide was that the world was just too dangerous and too scary for me to want to stay alive in. So I do not want to be alive in this world anymore. And that's how they stayed for a pretty long time throughout my childhood. I think to varying degrees, they got better and they got worse, but it was always that kind of narrative as like the world is too scary. I don't want to be in this world because bad things happen and I don't want more bad things to happen to me. Looking back on it, I know now kind of some of the things that caused these thoughts and kind of where they came from in terms of, things I was going through at the time that I just didn't really realize. But as I got older, these thoughts never left. Unfortunately, they were never addressed. I, made some effort to talk about them and to try to get some help. But again, I was 11 years old. There wasn't really much I could do on my own. So in middle school, I turned to YouTube videos, actually, watching inspirational videos about people who had, dealt with suicidal thoughts and overcome them, or people that had survived suicide attempts. That's kind of how I dealt with them, was I just watched these videos of other people talking about them, trying to understand myself a little bit better. Also, around the time that I was in middle school was when I started self-harming. This isn't it wasn't directly related to suicide. It was kind of something I did that actually pushed the suicidal thoughts away a little bit more, where I was like, well, I want to kill myself, but I can't do that right now. So if I hurt myself, that's kind of the next best thing. That was the way my, middle school brain was rationalizing why this was okay to do. Obviously, I don't condone self-harm. It was the way that I coped at the time. I still struggle with it now. There's no shame in it, I feel, but it is an ineffective coping skill, and it's not going to help long term. So when I went into high school was kind of when the suicidal thoughts, I think, got worse for me, and it was getting to the point where I felt like I couldn't handle them on my own anymore. So when I was 17, that was the first time I decided to see a therapist. My parents let me see a therapist. I went a single time and I was too nervous to say anything. I didn't talk about my suicidal thoughts. I didn't really talk about anything. I don't even remember the appointment, but I went once. And then I was like, I don't need therapy. I'm going to just continue to ignore these thoughts and hope that they go away. So I did that for a pretty long time. So when I was 17, that was when I saw the therapist initially. And then I didn't go and see a therapist again until I was 22. So that was 5 more years of me just pushing these thoughts away, pretending that they didn't happen, pretending that they didn't exist, and just kind of going about my life, having these pretty constant suicidal thoughts. In college, things got really, really difficult for me. That is when the suicidal thoughts had been kind of passive up until that point, where it was like, I want to kill myself. I don't want to be alive, but I'm not really looking for a way to go do that. The thoughts were just there, but I wasn't, actively seeking out methods in order to end my life. That changed in college. I went through a pretty long period in college where I was drinking heavily in order to deal with the way I was feeling. And when you're in college, people don't really look at drinking as like a bad thing. So even though I was doing it way to excess and it was interfering with my school, it was interfering with my life, I was a young college student. So that's what people thought you did. Like, you drank. So no one really realized that I had a problem. And in college is when I had my first actual suicide attempts, where they were still a little bit less active. They were still pretty passive. It was more of like, I would do things that could potentially put myself in a dangerous situation. I wasn't actively like, I'm doing this, to kill myself. It was more like, I'm going to do this. It's not good for me. Maybe it'll kill me and that'll be great, was how I was thinking about it at the time. So that happened pretty frequently in college. I went through, quite a few passive attempts like that. And no one noticed. It wasn't like a thing that I think was noticeable. I would stay in my room for extended periods of time. I wouldn't engage with people. I missed a lot of classes, but no one really thought anything of it, and I didn't say anything. So this kind of went undetected throughout most of my college. When I was 22, I started seeing a therapist again. I actually went back to the therapist that I saw when I was 17. And I saw her for a short period of time. During that time, I did talk a little bit more about my suicidal thoughts. I downplayed them a ton because I was terrified to talk about them. I had never spoken about them before, and it just wasn't really like something that felt okay for me to express. So I talked about them as more passive, and more of an annoyance than like an actual serious problem. So my therapist didn't do like a ton about this, mainly because I wasn't being super honest. But I did have, when I was 22, I had my first like very active attempt where I actually went out of my way and did something with the intention to kill myself. What I did didn't work. Nothing happened. So physically, I was totally fine, which was kind of difficult for me to deal with. So I came to my therapist at the time to explain, what I did. And I went through what I did and how my intention was to kill myself and how it didn't work. And my therapist basically said, well, you didn't get physically injured, so it doesn't count as an attempt. Which is just not true. Any attempt, whether or not you end up physically injured or not, should be taken seriously. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So again, I was like, all right, I'm just going to shove these thoughts back down because clearly nobody cares. Clearly it's not a big deal. I'm going to just ignore it. So I kept doing that for a pretty long time. So it was actually another 3 years until I saw another therapist, and I just dealt with these thoughts on my own. I I self-harmed as a way to cope with these feelings I was having. I ended up stopping drinking shortly after that attempt. So that helped things a little bit because alcohol is a depressant. It makes things way worse. So not drinking helped my mood a little bit, but I was still struggling a lot with these thoughts, and they were very, very constant. So I have chronic suicidal thoughts. So I have them all the time, um, to varying degrees. So sometimes the thought is just there. I can kind of be like, well, I have the thought, like, cool, not going to do anything about it. Sometimes the thoughts get really, really overwhelming, and I'm like, I have to act on these thoughts. But I just kind of continued to handle it on my own until I was 25. When I was 25, I was like, I cannot handle this anymore. I just can't do it. And that is when I decided to look for another therapist. So in a pretty short span, I tried 2 different therapists. I tried one for a few months, and I just never really like clicked with her. Like, I felt very uncomfortable and I couldn't really talk about things. And I remember one of my sessions, and ended up being my last session with her. She was like, well, I can tell that you're hiding something from me, and if this is going to work, you need to tell me what you're hiding. And I was like, okay, I have an opportunity now. And I told her that I have really bad suicidal thoughts and I'm really struggling to deal with them, and they're constant and they're overwhelming, and I feel like I can't cope with them anymore. Unfortunately, she did not help me with this. She told me that, like, it's so stupid. She told me I was possessed by a demon, and that's where my suicidal thoughts were coming from, which was a ridiculous statement and something that you should never, ever, ever say to somebody who is suicidal, because it's just not true and it just doesn't help. So that was my last appointment with her, because I was like, well, she's not going to take me seriously, so I guess I'm better, going back to dealing with them by myself. But thankfully, I decided that I was going to give therapists another shot, even though I didn't have a great record. I was 2 for 2 with not great therapists. And I found my therapist, he's my current therapist. He's fantastic. And I immediately from the intake felt pretty comfortable with him, which wasn't something I had experienced with therapists before. I'm kind of a shy person. It's really hard for me to open up. So I was like surprised actually at how comfortable I felt. And that is 100% what has saved my life. Very soon after that I started seeing him, I started journaling. I had a hard time talking about the things that were bothering me. I had a hard time bringing those up in session. So I started journaling as a way to kind of help with that. And I would send my journal to my therapist. It was his suggestion. He did say, like, if I say no, if I'm not comfortable with that, it's totally fine. But I thought that was actually a really good way to help me talk about things that I was having trouble bringing up, because if he could read about them beforehand, he could kind of help guide the conversation and help me be able to speak about them. So the first week or so of my journaling, it was heavily, heavily my suicidal thoughts. That was pretty much what filled all the pages, was me saying how much I didn't want to live, how I had thought through a plan, how, like, I didn't think I was going to make it past the next month. That's how terrible I was feeling. And he read this, and he took it very seriously, and it was such a weird feeling for me to have someone finally be like, wow, it sounds like you are suffering a lot, and like these things that you're dealing with are really, really difficult and painful, and you shouldn't have to be dealing with those on your own. And I was like, oh, somebody cares. Within the first month or so, I think, of seeing my therapist, I was hospitalized. And that was honestly one of the best things that I felt like could happen, because I knew I was being taken seriously. Going to the hospital was absolutely terrifying. I did not want to go. I was, crying the night before, like kind of freaking out, because it was sort of planned for me to go. But I felt safe and I felt comforted by the fact that someone had believed that these thoughts were as bad as I was saying that they were. And that is definitely what has saved my life and what has kept me alive up until this point. I'm 27 now, and the past, couple years since that first hospitalization, my suicidal thoughts they haven't gone away. They're still there. They're still really bad sometimes. I've had to be hospitalized, I think 7 other times. A couple times I was hospitalized following a suicide attempt. Sometimes I was hospitalized to interrupt a plan that I had. But every time I've gone, it has saved my life. And it's great knowing that I have really, really good support. And I have people that believe me. I have people that care about me, and people that, are willing to sit and listen when I'm having a bad day. So I think the biggest thing about deciding to share a little bit more of my story is I want people to know that they're not alone. All my life, when I was going through these chronic suicidal thoughts, I felt totally alone, and I felt like there was no one else that felt this way. I had always heard people talk about suicide, and sometimes this is how it is, and that's also fine. But I always heard people talk about suicide as it's like one singular event. You have the thoughts, you have a plan, you do something, it's over. I never felt like other people could relate to the continuous nature of my suicidal thoughts. I always have them. I was constantly being asked by doctors, like, how often do you have suicidal thoughts? And I never knew how to answer that because I was like constant, like 24/7. They're there. It's not like I have them like sometimes a week. And I'm not saying that like the way I have them is more severe. Every instance of suicidal thoughts is severe and needs to be taken seriously. I just hadn't heard anyone relate to how I was feeling. Since then, since I've started to be a little bit more open about this, I've met other people who can relate to the chronic suicidal thoughts, and that has meant a lot to me. So again, the reason I'm sharing this stuff is because I want people to know that they're not alone, and I want people to know that they deserve help and they can find someone who is supportive. I think it's difficult to find a therapist that is supportive, but once you do, it's well worth the effort because it can be extremely, extremely life-saving. And yeah, I think, reaching out to friends, reaching out to family, all of that stuff, people that you feel safe with, like everyone needs a support network. Everyone needs people that care about them that they can talk to about suicidal thoughts. And that was something that I didn't have growing up. And I felt like I just wasn't allowed to talk about them. So I didn't. And I almost wasn't here as a result of that. So all of this is to say that if you are struggling with suicidal thoughts, you're not alone, and you deserve care, you deserve help. There are people that love you and that are willing to help you. The National Suicide Hotline is a really great resource that I've used a few times myself. The number for that is 988. I'll also put a link to their website in the description of this video. But overall, just reach out to someone if you're feeling this way. If you have friends or family or people that you know that are feeling this way, ask them about it, talk to them, keep a dialogue open, because research has shown that talking about suicide will help reduce the likelihood of a suicide attempt. And yeah, sorry I rambled a lot in this video, but that is pretty much it for this video. Thank you for listening to my story. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I will do my best to answer. And I will be making suicide prevention related videos for the rest of this month. If there is a topic that you are interested in related to this that you would like to see me cover, please also leave that in the comments so I can have some more ideas for videos this month. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.